Part 18. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 171. Ahem. Long Xianyeo held a rusty iron sword, supported herself on the ground and gasped. She thought the appearance of the ironclad ship would determine the victory. But who would have thought that after discovering the existence of the ironclad ship, the Sea Clan Lord directly ordered the warriors to block Long Xianyeo's land route to the ironclad ship. Now between Long Xianyeo and the ironclad ship, there are thousands of Sea Clan warriors holding fine iron tridents or spears, staring at them covetously. Even if there are several lords from the military as allies, Long Xianyeo seems a little powerless to turn the tide of the war when there are only sailors and no warships. Damn it! Long Xianyeo cursed secretly. Now the reinforcements of the Sea Clan are endless, and it is obvious that they want to bury all of their human lords on this island. The longer the time drags on, the more disadvantageous it will be for Long Xianyeo. Even according to the intelligence provided by the intelligence department of the military. The Sea Clan leader who besieged Baexiang Island this time was led by a female Sea Clan member named Kama. The opponent held a divination artifact called the Glazed Night Pearl in his hand. If the artifact in the opponent's hand was not destroyed, any plan made by Long Xianyeo would be discovered by the opponent during the implementation process. The opponent had an absolute advantage in terms of military strength, technology, and tactics. In this way, the opponent seemed to be born invincible. Long Xianyeo, who had only experienced 2 low-level copies, had not yet encountered such a difficult opponent. Compared with the current age of exploration, Long Xianyeo felt that the war games he had experienced were simply a fight between chickens. After entering this age of exploration, Long Xianyeo knew what the dangers of the world were. The enemies here would not wait until both sides had developed before attacking. If they wanted to fight, they would not leave the enemy a chance to survive. He tightly grasped the hilt of the sword in his hand. Obviously, it was enough to board the ironclad ship. Since she has seen hope, why should she send despair back? You temporarily get the affairs officer, Juluo. You temporarily get the affairs officer, Dakai. The guy who interfered with me gave me something new. Long Xianyeo's eyes lit up at first. But after seeing that there were 2 affairs officers, his eyes dimmed again. The other side dispatched no less than 10,000 sea warriors this time, and I was at an absolute disadvantage after losing my ship. Can 2 affairs officers convince the other side to surrender and withdraw? Sighing, Long Xianyeo looked around. I just don't know if these 2 affairs officers will suddenly appear like the ironclad ship just now. If they appear in the Sea Clan's line, it will be a bit bad. Fortunately, what Long Xianyeo was worried about did not happen. Juluo and Dakai walked out of the armored cruiser. After walking out, Juluo looked at the sky. The position of the sun is not much different from what he saw just now at Gao Qiang's place. This place should not be far from the burial ground. That is. Juluo frowned slightly and looked under the cruiser. On the ground not far away, a group of weirdos with fish heads and human legs were laughing wildly. Why are these ingredients so noisy? Raised a finger and gestured to the sea people. Juluo found that in fact, only a part of the body needs to be cut off, and most of the remaining parts are completely edible. Of course, this kind of new type of ingredients with strange shapes, neither human nor ghost. Juluo has lived for so many years and this is the first time he has seen it. They look like they are dying. Dakai pointed to the position of Long Xianyeo in the distance and said word by word. Juluo looked over. Long Xianyeo was struggling to hold on under the harassment of a small group of sea warriors. Even if these monsters with fish heads and human bodies landed on the ground, their combat power did not decrease. On the contrary, the sailors under Long Xianyeo did not have the strong individual combat power of the sea people. In close combat, almost everyone was injured. This won't work. Juluo shook his head. Gao Qiang needed the sailors recruited by Long Xianyeo to start the warship, otherwise he could only harass his subjects one by one in the wall of size. If they all die, the Lord will not be happy. Juluo turned his head while speaking, "Uncle, it's up to you. Saving Long Xianyeo and keeping these people who drove the ship is obviously good for everyone." Dakai did not refuse. After holding the hammer and gesturing for a while, suddenly put the hammer on his waist, then raised his arms with muscles, and suddenly removed a 105 mm howitzer from the deck. Aiming in the direction of Long Xianyeo, Dakai fired a cannon at the besieged sea tribe. Boom! The sudden rise of flames made everyone look at the ironclad ship. When they saw Dakai holding the 105 mm howitzer, they couldn't help but open their mouths. Holding the naval gun in one hand, whose general is this? In the shallow sea area, Kama frowned slightly. Human. After seeing the terrifying deterrent power of Dakai, Kama did not seem very nervous. It was not because she was confident in her sea warriors, but in herself. The appearance of most sea creatures is hard to describe. Some have fish heads and human bodies, some have fish bodies and human legs, and some are completely monsters. But Kama is obviously an exception. As a rare person with a human body and a fish tail among the sea creatures, she is also a woman. Many human lords had a good first impression of Kama. With her personal talent, the siren song, Kama even won the attention of a native governor. Siren song. Introduction: your singing voice is so beautiful that it is almost like a demon. Any life form that hears your singing will be unable to resist offering everything for you, even becoming your blood food. Feature: when you sing, intelligent life forms that have never seen you will increase their favorability towards you by 0% to 100% after hearing your singing. This personal talent is also the reason why Kama often hides herself in battle. Her trump card has always been herself. As long as intelligent life forms that have never seen her hear her singing, they will involuntarily increase their favorability towards her. And this favorability will be transferred to the people of the territory and will be expressed in the form of loyalty. Once the favorability towards oneself exceeds the loyalty to the Lord, then rebellion will follow. Originally, Kama had not used this ability because she was afraid that the human race would be on guard. But now she saw Dakai appear. She understood that it was time. No. Seeing that the Sea Lord beside her had taken the lead, Kama stopped moving. Perhaps she could wait a little longer. At this time, Dakai had already rowed a lifeboat to Baexiang Island. Facing the siege of the sea warriors, Dakai naturally took out the howitzer without hesitation and inserted it into the mouth of a sea warrior. Then he exerted force and pierced through the opponent's gills directly. Boom! A cannon shot blew another warrior behind the opponent into minced meat. Dakai raised the howitzer in his backhand and smashed it behind him. With a few loud bangs, only a pool of rotten meat was left where the howitzer had hit. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 172. Dakai's sudden killing spree was directly suppressed by the sea warriors who came up to attack him. The sea warriors looked at each other directly, and they all saw the shock in the eyes of their friendly forces. Facing Dakai, they felt as if they were facing a war machine disguised as a human. At least the handheld 105 mm cannon has the terrifying power to smash people into pulp with their backhand after being fired. There is no warrior in the entire Sea clan who can do such a thing. The sound of a howitzer being dragged was heard. Dakai looked at the sea warriors surrounding him and walked forward step by step. You will make the Lord unhappy. Things that make the Lord unhappy must be broken. Listening to what Dakai said word by word, the sea tribe warriors who had an absolute numerical advantage suddenly felt a little palpitated. It was like being targeted by some wild beast. In the past, they would only feel this kind of heart palpitations when facing adult sharks, or even more terrifying beings. But, the aura exuded by Dakai is still above those beasts. How is it possible? How could a human being make them feel this way? Warriors of the Sea Tribe. Suddenly, a Sea Lord swam out of the sea and stood on land. He observed Dakai directly behind Dakai for a long time and found that Dakai had no habit of turning back, so he dared to boldly land on land. After he landed on land, the momentum of the Sea Warriors suddenly increased a lot. This stems from the Lord path he has advanced to the third level, Orator. The Orator is a Lord path that is very subjective and initiative-oriented, and most of its abilities must be actively triggered. The first level and second level periods only gave him the active ability to mobilize and inspire respectively. But when it reaches the third level, there is a direct qualitative change. Blinded. Introduction. Your words can temporarily blind the fear of soldiers on either side of the war, causing the other side to fall into a state of unrelenting fighting in a short period of time. Staring at Dakai, the Sea Lord shouted loudly. There are thousands of us. If all the warriors come together, no matter how strong he is, he can't even think of killing us all before his energy is exhausted. An invisible sound wave spread out with the Sea Lord as the center. All the sea warriors who were hit by the sound wave fell into a momentary pause. Their brains are rapidly secreting excessive amounts of dopamine. There seemed to be invisible voices whispering in their minds. You're awesome, you're great, you can do anything. A large number of incentives and reward mechanisms stimulate the brains of the sea people, making them seem to have forgotten their fear. Ah! Suddenly, a sea warrior picked up a spear and rushed towards Dakai. The result was that he was instantly smashed into meat patties by Dakai wielding a howitzer. But under the cover of the Sea Tribe Lord on the coast, the Sea Tribe warriors had already lost their sense of fear. This scene not only did not frighten the other sea warriors, but instead caused the production of dopamine in their minds to increase even faster. Soon, a sea warrior's eyes were bloodshot. They felt like their brains were about to explode with excitement. It's going to break. A Sea Tribe warrior covered his head and said. If they don't kill something, their bodies will probably collapse first. In life on the coast, only Dakai is allowed to be killed because he is the enemy. No one can rob me. A warrior suddenly roared and rushed towards Dakai. As for his companion who had just been blown into a pulp, he had completely ignored him. Dakai did nothing at the moment. He just seemed to hear from the mouth of the Sea Tribe warrior, "Is it broken?" Boom. A grenade was fired to deal with the Sea Lord behind him who kept chattering with his mouth open. Then Dakai threw away the empty howitzer and smiled like a neighbor next door. It's broken, just fix it. What? There is no time to think about the meaning of the other party's words. The sea warrior who rushed over had been tightly clamped by Dakai with one big hand. Let me go. After saying that, the Sea Clan warrior suddenly heard the cracking sound of his skull. It wasn't until the moment before he completely lost consciousness that he realized what the human lunatic had done. He crushed his skull into a ball with his bare hands. Holding the half-circled fish head in his hand, Dakai looked at the other warriors. How to fix it? It's better to use the old method. Suddenly reaching out to grab a sea warrior, Dakai tore the opponent's fish mouth directly open, and then stuffed the fish head that was extremely firm in his hand into it. After hitting it several times with a hammer, the fish meat and fish bones were mixed together, forming a strange mess that looked pulpy but was extremely solid. The Lord of the Sea Tribe who passed through as a speaker had just been killed by Dakai with one shot. Now that they have passed through Dakai, the remaining warriors of the Sea Tribe suddenly wake up. Only then did they discover what Dakai was doing. He actually used the Sea Tribe as parts. And he was integrating the bodies of the sea warriors in an extremely rough way, as if he was making something terrifying. That's building a ship? The discerning sea people saw it. What Dakai is building is a ship made of fish bones as the keel, then beaten with flesh and scales, and finally condensed and mixed. Boom. 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 Dake's hammer was still ringing. Almost every once in a while, a sea warrior died. This sense of disparity made the sea warriors unable to tell whether they surrounded him, or he surrounded all of them. War weariness add 10%. Just when the morale of the sea tribe was about to collapse, a song like the sound of nature suddenly sounded on the shallow beach. The lord of the military suddenly found that his people were not moving. Including the sailors recruited by Long Xianyeo, everyone fell into a state of obsession. Everyone was appreciating the sound of nature, and even the spears that the sea warriors were about to stab seemed to be ignored. The sea tribe actually has a killer? Seeing that Dakai had stopped moving in the distance, Long Xianyeo couldn't help but froze. Dakai's fighting ability is obvious to all. If he was also affected by this song, the consequences would be unimaginable. On the armored cruiser, listening to the song emerging from the sea, Juluo suddenly smiled. "Oh, you finally showed up." The cruiser was equipped with a sonar radar, which was a rusty old thing, but it could still be used. Kama might think she was hiding well. In fact, what she didn't know was that when she sang the first melody, her position as a war commander was exposed in front of Juluo. Staring at the position marked on the sonar, Juluo stretched out his foot and stepped on a pedal. It was the trigger device of the depth charge modified by Dakai. Juluo squinted and smiled slightly. It was a pity to waste such a good ingredient. Bye bye. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 173. In the shallow sea, Kama showed off her singing voice without any worries. Although some sea warriors were arranged to symbolically protect her, but she didn't think she would be in any danger. The Age of Discovery was definitely the most suitable era for the sea people. Few other races could effectively harm the sea people hiding in the deep sea in this era. And this is also the basis of Kama's confidence. Lord. Suddenly, a sea warrior called Kama. This voice seemed extremely abrupt in the melodious melody. Kama did not stop singing, but just opened his eyes and looked at a sea warrior with dissatisfaction, as if blaming the other party for disturbing his good things. Facing Kama's slightly angry eyes, the sea warrior shuddered, but still quickly pointed to the sea. Lord, what do you see? Kama looked in the direction he pointed in confusion. Several huge spherical objects were falling towards him. Wait, Kama suddenly widened his eyes. What is that thing? Boom. 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 Several water columns tens of meters high rose from the sea. Then dots of blood surged from the shallow sea to the surface, mixed with the broken limbs of the sea people. Juluo leaned on the railing of the cruiser with his chin propped up, watching the scene without any waves in his heart. The consequence of frying fish is that you can only harvest a pile of fragments. It's just a pity for these novel ingredients. On the other side, the sea warriors on land were stunned when they heard the song that stopped suddenly in their ears. Then they looked at the shallow sea behind them in horror, and it was quiet for dozens of seconds. The sound of the depth charge explosion was attenuated by the sea water and was not obvious on land. But through the water column that just rose, and then associated with the blood on the water surface and the song that had completely disappeared. What happened on the shallow beach seemed to be self-evident. Did they kill Kama? A sea lord frowned and had begun to retreat. Kama's death means that the enemy has the ability to attack underwater. This means that the sea clan lords are not absolutely safe even if they hide underwater. They don't care about the death of those people. But they must not turn a blind eye to their own safety. This small-scale local war against humans is intended to reduce the strength of human lords on a daily basis and not give humans a chance to develop. If too many lords are lost in this war, it would be a bit of a loss. I took note of the appearance of the warship on the sea. I looked at the increasing war weariness of my soldiers. We will come back for revenge. The Sea Clan Lord finally made a decision. Retreat. Tens of thousands of Sea Clan warriors retreated from Baekseong Island in a mighty manner, plunged into the sea and disappeared. Until then, the people under the military lord just came back to their senses from Kama's singing. Even so, they were still savoring the singing, with an intoxicated look on their faces. The sailors under Long Xianyeo were naturally the same. Although they have gradually returned to normal, they are still a little uneasy. The song seemed to have some magic power, almost taking away their minds, making them unable to come back to their senses for a long time. But, they still barely survived. At this moment, after Dakai came to his senses, he kicked the small boat made of the bones and blood of the sea people next to him. The boat rolled a few times on the coast and fell into the sea with a splash. Then it staggered and floated, drifting towards the distance of the sea. Dakai's action suddenly woke up the sailors under Long Xianyeo. Looking at the bloody boat made by brute force, the sailors couldn't help swallowing their saliva. Let alone the sea people. If anyone sees this boat on the sea in the future, I'm afraid they will have nightmares even when they sleep at night. But soon, they found that Dakai was walking towards them. Under Long Xianyeo's stunned expression, his sailors threw away their weapons one by one and raised their hands to show that they were not a threat. Dakai walked to Long Xianyeo without any hindrance. On the other side, the lords of the military watched the scene quietly. They didn't know what the relationship between Dakai and Long Xianyeo was. But it was obvious that they didn't intend to get involved in this mess. On the coastline, the ironclad ship was still staring at them. "Thank you." Long Xianyeo threw away the rusty iron sword in her hand, faced the nominal affairs officer in front of her, and forced a smile. If it weren't for the two affairs officers who came from the sky, she would have no chance of survival when she was surrounded by the sea people. No matter how strong the ironclad ship is, you have to board it before you can use it. Thinking of this, Long Xianyeo couldn't help but carefully look at the figure in front of her. Dakai's figure is very strong. Long Xianyeo had to raise her head to see the other's chin. At this time, Dakai slowly opened his mouth and said word by word, "Get on board." Long Xianyeo was stunned for a moment, then nodded obediently. In fact, she didn't even need to nod, the sailors around her were already running towards the ironclad ship impatiently. On the one hand, this level of warship was too tempting for the sailors. Some sailors would be satisfied even if they just licked it, let alone driving it. On the other hand, they were also afraid of Dakai's terrifying personal strength. He who could crush the heads of the sea creatures with his bare hands would probably be able to crush the heads of the sailors easily. Seeing the sailors abandoning him like this, Long Xianyeo shook his head with a wry smile and followed everyone to board the cruiser. Juluo had been waiting on the deck for a long time. Seeing Long Xianyeo, who was dressed completely differently from the sailors, board the ship, he already knew his identity. Opening the door of the captain's room, a nautical chart in the captain's room was revealed. Since Lord Long is safe and sound, there is no time to lose, so start the warship quickly. Lest the Lord wait anxiously. Juluo's words carried an unquestionable tone. For a moment, Long Xianyeo didn't understand whether he was the Lord or she was the Lord. At this moment, a loud noise came from the deck. Long Xianyeo subconsciously turned her head to look. Dakai actually knocked the dismantled howitzer back. Juluo smiled calmly, as a qualified shipbuilder, it is reasonable for Uncle Dakai to be stronger, right? Long Xianyeo nodded with a stiff neck. So is this really the officer who was rented to her? Is he really not an airborne uncle? Because of Dakai's power, Long Xianyeo held back many questions she wanted to ask. At this time, she also saw the message sent by Gao Qiang in the friend interface. Gao Qiang, did the ship receive it? If you receive it, come to the burial ground to pick me up. Boneyard. Long Xianyeo found the location of the boneyard through the sea chart on the cruiser. It is the same as Baekseong Island where Long Xianyeo is now. The boneyard is also located on the 9th trade route. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me. Chapter 174. Before leaving, Long Xianyeo looked back at the actions of the military lords at the moment. Then she shook her head in disappointment. The military lords didn't care about her life or death at all. Originally, she wanted to use the power of the military to some extent, but now it seems. Sighed. Long Xianyeo took down the nautical chart in the captain's room. Set sail. When Long Xianyeo arrived at the burial ground, more than 10 days had passed. The first thing she saw after arriving here was a giant dreadnought docked. The size of the Eternal Shield is several times larger than that of the armored cruiser, and it looks shocking at first glance. Around the Eternal Shield, a group of people who looked like shipwrights were chatting while applying new ship paint. Seeing Long Xianyeo's armored cruiser coming, the shipwrights stopped what they were doing instantly and retreated to the depths of the burial ground. I'm not a bad person. Long Xianyeo wanted to explain something. But in just a moment, the shipwrights disappeared. Puff. Juluo fell behind Long Xianyeo, covering his mouth and laughing. They just got off work at the appointed time, what do you think? Off work. Long Xianyeo looked up at the sun rising high outside the burial ground, revealing a puzzled expression. In Tenlong Group, no employee has ever gotten off work before the sun sets. Forget it, Long Xianyeo shook her head and sent a message to Gao Jiang. I'm here. Not long after the message was sent, Long Xianyeo saw an armored cruiser as abstract as herself coming over on the sea level in the distance. At a glance, on the deck, Gao Jiang and Satan were holding coconuts and bumping against each other, and Yana was lying on a lounge chair lazily basking in the sun. And at the bow, Wang Chuan and the old fisherman gathered together. After a period of getting along, Gao Jiang also learned that the old fisherman under Yana was called Chiaoda. He had been fishing for a lifetime and obviously had a lot in common with Wang Chuan. Sister Wang Chuan, I'm starving. Sasha stayed behind Wang Chuan, waiting for Wang Chuan to take the pole. Black Tuanzi also lay on Sasha's head and meowed. There is only one word to describe this picture composed of humans, elves, demons, and gods. Comfortable. Long Xianyeo took out a handkerchief from somewhere, put it in her mouth and bit it hard. Jealous, jealous. Is she the only one injured? Hey, Xianyeo is here. As the cruiser under Long Xianyeo approached, Gao Jiang raised the coconut in his hand and pointed it at Long Xianyeo. I just went to the next island to play Bokai Yufeng. Do you want to join us? It must be said that Avar's letter of marque is indeed useful. Since Gao Jiang reunited with Yana. While waiting for Long Xianyeo, he casually went to the waterway to play Bokai Yufeng. The armored cruiser led the way. Basically, every time Gao Jiang took out the plunder certificate from his pocket, the ships on the other side offered it without even looking at it. No one confirmed the authenticity of the plunder certificate. Of course, this also reduced a lot of the sense of achievement of plundering, making Gao Jiang feel like an ordinary daily life. Long Xianyeo shook her head and didn't respond to Gao Jiang's words. Compared to eating and drinking, she had other questions to ask. Arriving on the warship where Gao Jiang was, Long Xianyeo stared at Gao Jiang, and after thinking for a while, she asked the first question. Why help me? From the very beginning of the intervention, Gao Jiang had obviously helped her a lot just after entering the game. Otherwise, she might not survive the first attack of the Sea Tribe. But what puzzled Long Xianyeo was, she obviously didn't even pass Mr. M's level. Logically speaking, there was no reason for everyone in the academy to help her. That's what you said? Gao Jiang gulped down a sip of coconut juice. As a professor of the academy, is there any problem in helping a group of students? You are a professor. Long Xianyeo stared at Gao Jiang and pulled the corner of her mouth. It's not that she doubted the truth of what Gao Qiang said. But for her who had not stayed in the academy for a few days, Gao Qiang's words were unbelievable. Seeing that she couldn't get any answers from the questions, Long Xianyao had no choice but to give up. Then she glanced deeply at Yana and Satan on the side. So, who are they? If Long Xianyao remembered correctly, the races in this war game definitely do not include elves and demons. Them. Gao Qiang smiled, just like you will get used to it in a few days. Without Yana and Long Xianyao, the two tools. How can Gao Qiang realize free exploration without awakening? But since you are here, then everyone is here. As he spoke, Gao Qiang took out a broken treasure map. Although this incomplete treasure map lacks reference objects and channel markings, but it is still easy to match it with the full map owned by the fallen empire. The location of the island in the treasure map is on the 5th channel planned by the company now. Looking at the location pointed out by Gao Qiang on the map, Long Xianyao's expression changed several times. There was worry and hesitation. What's wrong? Gao Qiang noticed Long Xianyao's expression and asked curiously. He told Bai Hexio and others about this coordinate, and also told Yana. But it is obvious that no one else has such rich expression changes as Long Xianyao. That channel is where the Blood Clan appears. With almost no hesitation, Long Xianyao told the information he knew. If there is no accident, the place where my father landed is also on that channel. After thinking for a while, Long Xianyao still told the whole situation in this war game. This includes the reason why Mr. M disagreed to support the military. In this era of great navigation, humans should not be at a disadvantage. The Pan-Ocean Free Trade Company, as an ocean overlord level force, is still a thorough indigenous human organization. In such an environment, humans can only be said to be like fish in water in this war game. But the enemy is not a small role. The Blood Clan and the Sea Clan are the biggest enemies of humans in this war game. Among them, the Sea Clan is very smart. They never take the initiative to provoke indigenous forces, and they only pick the weak ones on the side of human lords and gradually wipe them out. Human lords like Long Xianyao who came in through the request for help are the main targets of the Sea Clan. The Blood Clan, because of their ignorance of life and death, ran into trouble with the Pan-Ocean Free Trade Company at the beginning of the game. Now they are trapped on some islands in the 5th channel by the company's fleet. Although it is very difficult to completely wipe out the Blood Clan. But because of the company's blockade, the Blood Clan can only wander in the 5th channel now, and there is no opportunity to develop at all. Isn't this just right? Gao Qiang clapped his hands. Go to the 5th channel, I will find my miracle, and you will find your father, killing two birds with one stone. No. Long Xianyao's expression was a little solemn. According to the military's intelligence, the Blood Clan has obtained a miracle ship. I doubt whether the company as a native can still withstand the pressure. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 175. It's better if you can't stand it? Seeing Long Xianyao looking at him in confusion, Gao Qiang turned his head away awkwardly and coughed twice. He accidentally said what was in his heart. If the Blood Clan broke through the pressure of the company, it means that the miracle warship they have will definitely be revealed. And this will save Gao Qiang the time to explore the treasure map. Glancing at Long Xianyao, Gao Qiang changed the subject and said, by the way, can't you ask your father about the situation? Long Xianyao frowned and shook her head. In fact, since I joined the academy, I haven't been able to contact anyone from Tenlong Group. Whether it's real-world communication or wargame friend requests, no one has approved it. They should be deliberately avoiding me. When saying this, Long Xianyao glanced to the side. She didn't think so herself, because even if they really avoided her deliberately, it was impossible that there was no news at all. Long Xianyao had actually asked this question to the military lord long before being besieged by the Sea tribe. But the military had not received intelligence about the activities of Teng Long Group in this war game for a long time. As the daughter of Teng Long Group, she naturally knew that Teng Long Group could not keep the intelligence so secret. But at the same time, she did not believe that so many people from Teng Long Group followed Long Ziwen in, and all of them would encounter accidents. Sure enough, we still have to go to the 5th channel to take a look. Seeing Long Xianyao suddenly silent, Gao Qiang smiled. It seems that you are ready. Yeah. Long Xianyao nodded. After everyone reached a consensus, the 2 armored cruisers gradually left the burial site and drove out along the 9th channel. According to the markings on the nautical chart, if you don't want to take a long detour, you must pass through a dangerous whirlpool area from the 9th channel to the 5th channel. Of course, this kind of question is not difficult for Gao Qiang at all. Standing behind Gao Qiang, Zhuo narrowed his eyes and whispered, "You also know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line." After Gao Qiang and others left, Bai Hexio stood on the deck of the Eternal Shield, feeling the gentle sea breeze. The loose short hair swayed in the sea breeze. Then, there was a sound of rushing on the sea. On the sea level completely opposite to Gao Qiang, a huge steel fleet was slowly approaching here. The moment it approached, a figure flew over from the deck of another giant ship and threw Bai Hexio to the ground. "Ah, Xiao Bai, you didn't leave." Bai Hexio pushed the other person away in disgust. The one who rushed over was the captain of the Star of Tomorrow, a little girl in a pink gauze skirt. Although she was a little girl, she obviously didn't learn what it meant to be quiet. Lifting up her skirt, she stepped directly onto the bulge of the turret, then turned sideways to Bai Hexio, revealing a small tiger tooth. "He, is Xiao Bai shy? Huan's hero, you are such a disloyal person, how dare you come back," Bai Hexio said unhappily. This burial ground is really amazing, and it was a surprise. So everyone except him left, and he was almost caught on a long journey. "Oh, is Xiao Bai angry with me because of this?" Huan's hero stretched out her tone, came to Bai Hexio and stretched out her hand to compare his height with hers. "Is it really not because I am taller than Xiao Bai? And I will grow up in the future." "Okay, Zero, stop talking too much." A mature and royal voice came from another giant ship. The woman in Cheongsam stood at the front of the deck with her arms around her chest, stopping the two from playing. "It would be good for the Lord to go out and gain some experience." Experience?" Huan's hero sat on the turret, spread her hands and said helplessly, "But the uncle went out with me. And it's really too much to go out and play without taking me, the world's #1 beauty and the world's #1 intelligence expert." While speaking, Huan's hero shook her legs in the direction of Bai Hexio. "Is that right, the world's #1 quick shooter Xiao Bai?" Bai Hexio's face was dark. "Why does the sentence only sound like a compliment to me when you say it? Besides, I'm different from you, okay? I'm willing to sacrifice my heart for our dignity at any time." Huh. Huan's hero looked at Bai Hexio with disdain. "Then why didn't you go with him when you went on a long trip?" "Well." After thinking carefully, Bai Hexio answered seriously, "It's not too late to sacrifice tomorrow." "No." Bai Hexio suddenly reacted. "Why are you talking about me all the time? You guys who escaped from the battlefield and didn't call me are even more bastards." No. Huan's hero stretched out a finger and shook it. Then she pointed at the Cheongsam lady standing on the deck of another warship. "Sister Lianqian is different from you, okay? What about you?" Bai Hexio narrowed his eyes and looked at Huan's hero. "Me?" Huan's hero thought for a few seconds, and suddenly couldn't find a reason for a while. Then she narrowed her eyes and looked at Bai Hexio. "I'll lock your throat." "Ah." Lianqian looked at the two people fighting and sighed helplessly. Turning his head, he looked at the place where Gao Qiang left in the distance. I hope the Lord is doing well. On the cruiser, the sky gradually darkened. A group of people were fighting over the fish meat that Julo had just grilled. Sasha stepped on Yena's abdomen with one foot and took the grilled fish away from Yena with one hand. At the same time, he said his victory speech. Hee, you deserve it for making your food so bad. Wow. Hearing the voice of the black ball in her ear, Sasha felt bad. Then she turned her head and saw that the black ball had already wrapped around the grilled fish with his mouth wide open. Let go, bastard. A scream broke through the sky, and Sasha kept shaking the wooden stick in her hand, and there was another chaos on the cruiser. Are they usually so noisy? Long Xianyeo looked at the scene and pulled the corner of her mouth. As the daughter of Teng Long group, she had never experienced such a thing as snatching food. On the other side, Long Xianyeo turned her head to look. Is it really good to grill fish like this? On the deck of the cruiser, Joloo made full use of the characteristics of using local materials. A solid incendiary bomb was ignited by Joloo on the deck and used as consumables for grilling fish. Looking at the molten iron on the deck, Long Xianyeo couldn't help but twitch his eyelids. This ship shouldn't be in trouble, right? Really nothing will happen. The new grilled fish is ready. Joloo came over with a plate of grilled fish sprinkled with seasonings, picked up the skewer, and stuffed 2 grilled fish into Gaoqiang and Long Xianyeo's mouths respectively. Then he walked towards Wang Chuan again. Sister Wang Chuan, come and have some too. Wang Chuan nodded, took the grilled fish from Joloo, and bit it hard, as if to avenge the day when no fish was caught. Well, delicious. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shi De. Chapter 176. After some fun, the night was completely dark. Most people and sailors returned to the cabin to rest, and there were not many people left on the deck. Gaoqiang wanted to go back to rest, but he heard a knocking sound on the warship. Uncle, why haven't you slept yet so late? Gaoqiang rubbed his sleepy eyes and walked over. Then he found that it was not Dakai who was doing it, but the 3-no girl Wang Chuan, who looked weak and fragile. Going around behind Wang Chuan. Gaoqiang watched Wang Chuan's actions at the moment. She was holding a broken wooden board that had just been fished out of the water in the afternoon, and she was carving something crookedly with a reef that was hooked at noon. Black Ball was lying on Wang Chuan's shoulder at the moment, his whole body stretched into a long strip, and he seemed to have fallen asleep. Gently taking Black Ball away from Wang Chuan, Gaoqiang whispered, "What are you writing?" What Wang Chuan wrote did not seem to be human words. From this point of view, it was no different from ghost paintings. It was a bit scary to look at it late at night. Wang Chuan turned his head and glanced at Gaoqiang with empty eyes, and then replied, "It was He Tuanzi who asked me to write it." He Tuanzi? Gaoqiang looked at the long rectangular block in his hand, a little puzzled. I don't know what's the point of hanging a creepy sign in the cabin late at night. After a while, Wang Chuan put the wooden sign in front of the cabin door and said, "It's done." Then he turned around and walked out with the fishing rod. Seeing Wang Chuan going fishing late at night, Gaoqiang shook his head helplessly. In the 10 days before Long Xianyeo arrived, Gaoqiang had been staying on Yena's warship, so he also discovered a very special situation. Wang Chuan doesn't need to sleep. At least, Gaoqiang doesn't seem to have seen Wang Chuan sleeping. Every morning when he wakes up, Wang Chuan is fishing, and when he falls asleep, Wang Chuan is still fishing. It's a very regular work and rest habit. It's a pity that he can't do it. Gaoqiang yawned and walked deeper into the room with the black ball in his arms. There were comfortable beds and quilts in the lounge, which was much more comfortable than being outside in the wind and rain. Hush! watching the two armored cruisers slowly stop sailing. Deep in the sea, a faint light gradually lit up. A sea clan lord with limbs sneered and looked up. It was worth it that he followed the human lord for so long, and there were indeed accomplices. The ships that could kill Kama must be destroyed. And after observing these days, he found a weakness of these two ironclad ships. Too few crew members. The lords on the ship were obviously new to this war game, and they didn't have many people under their command. These lords also looked quite immature. At least he had never seen the habit of arranging people to watch the night on these two ironclad ships. But this also made it convenient for him. "Chao Chi, we'd better be careful," the other Sea Clan lords behind him suddenly reminded. After all, they were facing two ironclad ships. Once they were discovered, the other party would be alert, and it would not be easy to launch a sneak attack in the future. "Humph, be careful. That depends on whether the other party still has a future." Chao Chi sneered, looked at several people, and pointed at the position of the sea surface. "Haiyan, Haining, you are the strongest. You will take the warriors to sneak in from the deck later and see if you can take the opportunity to kill the humans in the ship. Then Lang Hao and I will try to sink the ship. Fragile humans cannot breathe underwater. Once the ship sinks, they will surely die. As for the others, wait for the time being." The several Sea Clan lords behind Chao Chi looked at each other and nodded. Looking at this scene, Chao Chi smiled with satisfaction. Kama's death brought a great impact to the Sea Clan forces in this area. In the past, most ironclad ships were in the hands of the company. As long as there was no conflict with the indigenous forces, the Sea Clan still had a considerable advantage in this war game. But today was different. The human lords of the Ninth Channel now have two more ironclad ships, which is definitely a big threat to the Sea Clan. As long as this threat is resolved, it will be easy for Chao Chi to integrate the Sea Clan lords in this area. By then, he will become the commander of the sea area. Having thought of the strategic development in the next few years, Chao Chi sneered and made a move. Seeing this, several Sea Clan lords led their warriors to take action. Puff! A group of waves rose, and Haiyan jumped out of the sea first and jumped onto the deck of the cruiser. Looking around, Haiyan's movements suddenly stopped, and his fish body became a little stiff. There are still people on the deck. It's just that the person has been sitting at the bow and was subconsciously ignored. In this way, hasn't he been discovered when he boarded the ship? In an instant, Haiyan thought a lot. The sound of his boarding the ship was not small. As long as the other party roared, the human side would be immediately alert. Thinking of this, Haiyan tensed his legs and was ready to run away. But the expected scream did not come. The little human girl sitting on the bow was like a deaf person, holding a fishing rod in her hand, and ignored Haiyan's arrival. "Wait, fishing rod." Haiyan looked at the fishing rod in Wang Chuan's hand and suddenly showed an angry expression. The thing he hated most was the fishing rod invented by humans. If it weren't for this kind of thing, it wouldn't be unsafe to eat in the sea. For a moment, Haiyan was filled with fear, and he took a step forward and kicked Wang Chuan into the sea. "That's all." He sneered coldly. Haiyan sent a signal to the sea. The next moment, Haining jumped up with hundreds of sea warriors. "Everything is safe." Haining and Haiyan nodded to each other, and then turned their eyes to the hatch of the cruiser. "Let's go." The sea warriors rushed into the interior of the cruiser through the hatch. But no one noticed that the sea behind them was covered with a thick fog that was so thick that they couldn't see their hands in front of them. When they entered the ship, they could no longer see the outside world through the hatch due to the thick fog. Suddenly, a huge wave hit the thick fog, causing the cruiser to shake slightly. After the huge wave, Wang Chuan, who was soaked all over, stood up again, grabbed the fishing rod in her hand, and resumed her original posture. But this time, her luck seemed to be much better. Not long after, the fishing rod in her hand shook slightly, and it was obvious that something had been caught on the rod. Splash. Wang Chuan gently raised her hand and lifted the fishing rod in her hand. A sea clan lord was hanging on the fishing rod, and his two small fish eyes were full of confusion. What happened? How did he suddenly come to the surface of the sea? Who is this human in front of him? For some reason, looking at Wang Chuan's empty eyes, a deep sense of fear rose from the heart of the sea clan lord. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me Shi De. Chapter 177. In the cabin, Haiyan and Haining had already walked a certain distance with hundreds of sea warriors. At this moment, the thick fog from the outside filled the cabin. The two fish also noticed something was wrong. No, this ship is definitely not that big. Haiyan recalled the size of the cruiser. Although this armored ship is not small in size, they are carrying hundreds of sea warriors. This is the first level of the cabin. How could they not reach the end after walking for so long? Realizing something was wrong, Haiyan suddenly put his arm on Haining's shoulder, shocking the other party. What are you going to do? Haining screamed subconsciously. Then he quickly covered his fish mouth with both arms. She breathed a sigh of relief when she noticed that there was no movement in the thick fog. Fortunately, humans sleep enough to die. Don't go any further, Haiyan reminded. Immediately, he ignored Haining's emotions and directly summoned a sea warrior and asked him to walk towards the way he came. However, after waiting for 20 minutes, the sea warrior showed no sign of returning. At this moment, Haiyan didn't need to remind him, Haining felt a little confused. Something is wrong. It didn't matter that they walked on the first floor of the cabin for a few minutes, assuming that the cabin of this ship was very large. But it's only a few minutes journey, and it's definitely a 20-minute round trip. Did the sea warrior have an accident on his way to the hatch? Unfortunately, due to the thick fog, the view inside the cabin was completely blocked, and Haining was not sure what the situation was now. Lord, come and take a look at this. At this time, a sea warrior suddenly spoke up. Haiyan and Haining walked over and felt a little cold in their hearts when they looked at the wooden board that had appeared at some unknown time. What is written on this wooden board is the language of the Sea Clan. But why are there wooden boards written in the Sea Clan language on human battleships? Moreover, not only is the writing on the wooden board ugly, the meaning it expresses is also very difficult to understand. Please note that he is merciful, so everyone has a chance to live, just follow the following rules. 1. Don't become a meritorious deed. The consequences of your karma will temporarily remove his sight from you. 2. Do not recite his true name. 3. If you notice his existence, please pretend that he does not exist. 4. Pay attention to your own spirit when you notice him frequently, you are not far from going crazy. 5. Don't look back, there is no road behind you. The board was not big and the number of words was not many, but it made Haiyan and Haining feel cold in their hearts. They didn't understand what the board meant, let alone who the merciful he was mentioned in the board. But when they saw the 5th article, they seemed to already know the fate of the previous sea warrior. That Sea Clan warrior probably won't be able to come back. What should we do next? Haining looked at Haiyan silently. Haiyan didn't speak for a while. He is thinking. Do you need to understand the content of this board? After all, the night is short. Once this night is missed and the human lords wake up, their sneak attack will fail. Road. Just when Haiyan was about to catch inspiration. As if it was planned, a sea warrior shouted excitedly. It took no effort at all. The stairs to the lower level they were looking for were actually right here. It seemed that no matter how big the ship was, it still came to an end with everyone walking like this. Haiyan subconsciously threw the inspiration behind him. Haining, let's go. After saying that, he turned to look at Haining. When Haining turned his head, the whole fish froze completely, and he saw a scarlet eye behind Haining. The sarcoid-like eyes were on the bulkhead of the ship. For the first time, You look directly at the leftover black dumplings you ate yesterday and unlock the SAN value attribute. Your SAN value -10. Ignoring the reminder from the war game, Hyan spoke tremblingly, "Hi, Haining. What's wrong? You always look like something is wrong." Haining followed Hyan's eyes in confusion, but found nothing. "You didn't see anything," Hyan subconsciously raised his voice. But in the blink of an eye, the scarlet eyeball that had just been stuck to the bulkhead disappeared. It seemed that everything was just his illusion. At this moment, Hyan suddenly swallowed his saliva. If he was the only one who saw that damn thing, did he just violate the third rule on the board? A guy is targeting me. In order to prevent myself from going crazy after staying in the thick fog for too long, Hyan pulled out a fish scale from his body, and then wrote a string of words in the language of the Sea tribe on the back of the board. Immediately afterwards, a sea warrior was found and asked to read the words out. The leftover black dumplings from yesterday. At this moment, Hyan suddenly felt that the sea warrior in front of him seemed to be grabbed by some huge force, and was suddenly pulled deep into the thick fog. After a few screams were heard, deathly silence returned. "Is this the ship of a human lord?" Hyan cursed angrily in his heart. Through the death of a sea warrior, he had already confirmed one thing. There are definitely dirty things on this ship, and they are monsters other than humans. Turning his head, he memorized the contents on the board. Hyan pulled up the uneasy Haining and chose to lead the team to the deeper layer. According to the contents on the board, they must not go back. Otherwise, the missing sea warrior will be their fate. In other words, they must find a way to leave the ship while moving forward. Or, wait for Keokai's plan to be completed and let the ship sink to the bottom of the sea. When the seawater flows back, they may be able to find the direction of departure along the position where the seawater surges. At this time, Keokai, who was placed with hope by Hyan, was staring at the outer armor shell of the cruiser and making a sound of tut. So how should this broken thing be dismantled? Keokai threw away the tools in his hand and roared at the sea. This was his first attempt to sink an ironclad ship. Who knew that it was not the same difficulty as sinking a wooden ship? It clearly looked like an outer armor made of iron sheets. But if you look closely, you will find that each piece of iron plate is screwed together with great force, tightly fitting. In addition to Chao Chi himself, there was a group of sea warriors working hard on the cruiser base. The trident made of fine iron not only did not leave any marks when it poked the armored shell, but it almost broke itself. This shows that ordinary tools can't dismantle this iron lump at all. And the shipwright who made this armored shell is probably not an ordinary person. Looking at the huge fist marks on the armored shell, Chao Chi swallowed his saliva. This damn thing is solid. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me Shida Di. Chapter 178. The plan to sink the ship failed. How is the situation on your side? If you can't assassinate, try to retreat before dawn. Looking at the chat sent by Chao Chi, Hyan's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Chao Chi's side can't be counted on. This ship is too weird. If possible, he really wants to retreat now. But the situation doesn't allow it at all. Tell me, isn't this ship a little too quiet? Haining suddenly said this. After listening, Hyan frowned and nodded. According to this, it is indeed a little too quiet. Chao Chi and his party tried to sink the two ironclad ships in the outside world. Whether successful or not, there should be no sound coming in. It's better to say that the silence in this ship is too creepy. I don't know if I heard the voices of the two fish. A gnawing sound suddenly appeared on the side of the two fish. Hyan turned his head and saw that the place where the sound came from was a steel hatch. They had seen too many similar hatches on the inner deck, and most of them could not be opened by them. But now this iron door seemed a little different. Hyan Haining suddenly called out softly, bringing Hyan back to his senses. What's wrong with you? turning his head to look at Heining's concerned expression. Hyen suddenly gritted his teeth and made a decision. Summoned a sea warrior, you, go open this hatch. After saying this, Hyen pulled Heining and quickly retreated to the protection of many sea warriors, looking at the hatch nervously. If it was normal, this hatch should not be able to be opened. But under Hyen's nervous gaze, the hatch that kept chewing was opened by the sea warrior with a creaking sound. Thicker fog poured out of the cabin. Gulp. Swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Hyen and Heining stepped forward cautiously and looked into the cabin. Because of the fog, they could hardly see anything, only a black shadow with its back to them. The continuous chewing sounds were made by the shadow. Your SAN value -1. -1. SHH. Hyen signaled Haining to keep quiet, and he led several warriors to the hatch. The closer they got to the hatch, the more obvious the chewing sound became. Until a crisp sound, Hyen looked at the red viscous liquid flowing out of the thick fog, his pupils widened. Thinking of the sea warrior who had just been pulled away by an invisible force, he looked at the vague back in the thick fog. Could it be him? Boom. Hyen rushed forward and closed the hatch. Run. Ah! The lights were bright in the cabin. Hearing the heavy door closing behind her, Sasha turned her head in confusion. At this moment, she was holding a basket of fruits and eating happily, and she didn't realize who had just walked over. Suddenly, Sasha's eyes widened. Hey! A bottle of ketchup was knocked over at the hatch. It wasn't me. Hyen, who had already run far away, heard a faint sound coming from his ear, and his speed increased a bit. Because there was a distance between them and there was a wall blocking them, he couldn't hear the sound behind him very well. But it should be the roar of some kind of beast. It seems that their bold actions just now have caused them to be targeted. That, Hyen. Heining suddenly stretched out his hand tremblingly, grabbed Hyen, and dragged Hyen down. Before Hyen got angry, Heining said in a crying tone, "Eyes, so many eyes." From Heining's perspective, the windows of the ship disappeared completely at this moment. Instead, there were large eyeballs like tumors. Those eyeballs looked at her with a curious look. Although they were not malicious. But, they gave her a sense of threat from natural enemies. Where are the eyeballs? Heining spoke subconsciously. But the next moment, he realized that Heining was in the same state as himself. He covered Heining's eyes and shook her hard. When Heining came back to her senses, all the strange visions had disappeared. It was as if everything that had just happened was just an illusion she saw. I don't want to play anymore. Heining said with some tears in her voice. When fighting with other lords, at most he would be blown to pieces by a cannon, or killed with a knife. No matter how big the threat is, it is exposed. But since boarding this ship, not only did she not see any enemies, but she had to be on edge all the time. This assassination was simply a psychological torture for her. Hyen clenched his fists. He knew that he must not let Heining collapse now. Many of the sea warriors present were Heining's subjects. Once Heining collapsed, the sea warriors fell into chaos, and the threat level would definitely increase exponentially. Thinking of this, Hyen put his hand on Heining's scales. Don't worry, we'll be out soon. This statement was not false, Hyen had actually found some clues. From the journey just now. This ship was definitely not as big as they perceived. What really affected them was the thick fog covering the cabin. Because of the thick fog, a short distance may be magnified several times or even dozens of times in their perception. Hyen calculated the size of the ship he had seen before. According to the size of this ironclad ship, even if the passage is expanded dozens of times, they can definitely get out of here before dawn. The premise is that they don't go crazy before that. We just need to move forward later, don't think about any rules. Hyen pulled Heining to remind him. He now began to suspect that the wooden board at the door was a trap. The third line on the wooden board said, If you notice his existence, please pretend that he does not exist. If it weren't for the reminder of the wooden board, they might not have noticed his existence in the thick fog at all. With Hyan's reminder, the road ahead was indeed much easier to walk. A group of sea people went down another deck, and there was no accident this time. No chewing sounds were heard, and there was no loss of sea warriors. After arriving at this deck, a group of sea people stopped. This is. Pushing open a door, Hyan rubbed his eyes. The human lord. Unconsciously, they actually walked to the rest area of the human lord. In a separate cabin, Gao Qiang was sleeping soundly on the pillow. When he heard the sound of the door opening, he turned over in his sleep and scratched his armpit. Because they didn't think about the rules, Hyan and Haining's sand values were still at a safe level. Looking at Gao Qiang's unguarded look, it seemed easy to kill. Hyan turned his head and looked at Haining, and they both understood the meaning in each other's eyes. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 179. Or, let's go, Haining said hesitantly. She understood the murderous intent in Hyan's eyes. But after experiencing many strange things in the cabin, she always felt that this assassination would not be so smooth. Only 2 sea warriors were lost and they arrived safely in the bedroom of the human lord. No matter how you think about it, the security is too lax. How do you know if you don't try? At this point, Hyan shook his head. Although escaping is important at the moment, but this human race is right in front of him, killing one is a profit. If he doesn't seize the great opportunity in front of him, he will probably not be able to sleep well from now on. What's more, he is not the kind of idiot who jokes with his own life. He casually summoned a sea warrior and handed a fine iron trident to the other party solemnly. Kill him. The sea warrior did not refuse. A sleeping human is easier to deal with than a lamb's cub. In this war game, many human lords died in the sea in their sleep, and this time was no exception. Under Hyan's gaze, the sea warrior slowly walked to Gao Qiang. He aimed the trident at the heart and stabbed it fiercely. Boom! A crisp sound. The sea warrior felt that he had stabbed something, but it was not the feeling of stabbing into the flesh. He seemed to have stabbed something hard. He turned his head and saw his companions looking at him with horror. What? The sea warrior put his eyes under the trident. Just now, a scarlet root vine suddenly grew out of the gap in the bed and blocked Gao Qiang's heart. The hardness of the root vine was acceptable, so that the trident stabbed by the sea warrior with all his strength did not hurt Gao Qiang's skin and flesh at all. But just when the sea warrior was about to make up the knife, the root vine suddenly rose up and stabbed directly into the sea warrior's brain from the position of the eye. In a short moment, only a thin piece of dried fish meat was left on the spot. Not good, not good. Hyan and Haining were facing Gao Qiang, but their bodies gradually moved to the side. After eating the sea warrior, the root vine became thicker and thicker, and seemed to be growing at an incredible speed. After a while, a huge warrior made entirely of root vines appeared in the room. The scarlet root vines formed its muscles, armor, and giant sword. In terms of height alone, this warrior was 1.5 times taller than the sea warrior, and his waistline was more than twice that of the sea warrior. It almost filled the entire cabin. A sea warrior rushed forward to protect his master, but was split in half from head to tail by the giant sword. Looking at the organs flying in front of him, Hyan suddenly smiled bitterly. He thought that accidents might happen, and he also thought of many unexpected situations. But in this situation, he really didn't guess it. Is this a human lord? Why is it that only the human lord he met has a second stage boss? Get out of this cabin. Hainan yelled at the warriors behind him and ran out of the cabin with Haining. Since he couldn't walk backwards on the deck, Hainan could only continue to run wildly towards the unknown front. As for taking 100 sea warriors to kill the monster, he didn't even think about it. Who can guarantee that there is only one such monster? If there are more, wouldn't they lose the chance to escape? While running, Haining turned her head and took a look. What made her tremble in her heart was that the small cabin door did not stop the footsteps of the root monster. In the thick fog, she vaguely saw that the body of the monster was like water, and it squeezed out of the cabin door. Dong, dong, dong. The heavy footsteps sounded, letting Hainan know that the monster had caught up. This monster obviously has nothing to do with the rules at the moment. And they know nothing about the monsters in the rules. We have to find a way to lure the monster away, otherwise everyone will die in this ship today. At this moment, Hainan could not care less about ignoring the rules on the board. Recalling the content of the rules. In the records on the board, he is a kind being, and the first rule says not to become a meritorious person, and the karma will make him look away temporarily. Hainan still has some understanding of the merits and karma of the human race. But there are obviously two ways to understand this content. Fortunately, Hainan is not alone, so he has a lot of experimental opportunities. Directly order a sea warrior under his command to kill Haining's men. Haining did not expect Hainan to suddenly issue such an order. In a moment of daze, one of his subjects was directly pierced in the brain by the trident. Hainan, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Haining suddenly distanced herself from Hainan and looked at Hainan in surprise. If she didn't have to escape now, she would have to ask Hainan for clarification. But Hainan was calmer than ever at this moment. Staring at a direction in the thick fog, Hainan said lightly, "Here it comes." A bloody mouth opened. The upper body of the sea warrior who had just killed his companion was swallowed up instantly, leaving only 2 legs. Gilialo. Haining swallowed his saliva and looked at the scene in horror. This. The most terrifying thing was that after the sea warrior was eaten, the monster in the dark had obviously not left. A dark object loomed in the mist, and it seemed to have set its sights on them. I see, I know. At this point, Hainan smiled. According to the first clue on the board, he should eat the existence of karma. What do you mean by not becoming a merit? This sentence is actually directed at the he written on the board. The real meaning is, don't become his merit. It seems that as a good god, Hainan will temporarily call it a good god. He should care more about things like merit and karma. Killing the same kind of sea warriors naturally became a merit in his eyes. And karma will divert his attention. In fact, it means that one must have merit. As long as one has merit, killing oneself will bear the karma, which will naturally divert his attention. In the current situation of being hunted, it is obviously impossible to obtain merit. But this does not bother Hainan at all. After the monster in the dark appeared, it was less terrifying than when it was hiding in the dark. He gave his men the order to kill the people of Haining. The warriors of the sea tribe in Hainan's hands surrounded and killed Haining's people. In a flash, 1/3 of Haining's men were killed or injured. It was for this reason that all the warriors in Haian's hands were tainted with the karma of their own tribe, and became merits in his eyes. Hainan smiled and gave his men an order. Run away. Soon the warriors disappeared in the mist. At the same time, the black shadow that had been following them disappeared. Hainan knew he was doing the right thing. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 180. He has no merit, but as long as he creates karma for others, the eyes of the good God will not fall on him. At this time, let the sea warriors separate and hide, and the good God will naturally not continue to follow him. One monster was temporarily led away. Next is the root monster that is still chasing everyone. Hainan suddenly approached Haining, lowered his voice, and asked Haining seriously, "Do you want to live?" Haining wanted to struggle. But hearing Haiyan's serious tone, he couldn't help but nodded. "Let your people stop the root monster." Hearing Haiyan's words, Haining subconsciously hesitated for a few seconds. After Haiyan's sudden attack just now, only 2/3 of her people were left, and most of them were injured. "If you do as Haiyan said, all these warriors will die here. But the lives of the people and their own lives." Haining hesitated for a moment, and whispered, "Okay." After receiving Haining's order, the sea warriors turned back and counterattacked without hesitation. This also depends on the characteristics of the basic warrior units of the sea. Sea Clan Warriors. Features: slow, strong. Slow, it is more difficult to dodge in close combat, and the response to emotions will be delayed by 1 to 48 hours. It is precisely because of the slow characteristics that the emotions of the Sea Clan warriors are very slow to respond. Whether it is fear or war weariness, they will not react at the first time. Therefore, they will not realize that they have killed their companions at the first time, nor will they realize that their lord is killing them at the first time. Of course, this does not mean that they will not realize it in the future. After a few hours, various emotions began to gradually erupt, and it was the time for them to backfire. So whenever an incorrect order was issued, it meant that the Lord of the Sea Clan had no intention of letting these warriors go back alive. Only a few warriors were left to protect the two. After abandoning most of the warriors, the voice of the root monster gradually faded away. But Haiyan and Haining still did not dare to slow down. Haiyan accidentally saw the internal map of the ship in Gao Qiang's room before. The two lower decks are actually U-shaped corridors, so even if you don't retreat, you can leave this damn cabin from another exit. Suddenly, a staircase leading upwards appeared in front of Haiyan. As expected, they walked far enough in the fog. Because the route is fixed, as long as they don't walk in the opposite direction, they will not be lost. Without triggering the loss, the fog will at best only magnify the length of the corridor. Continue to move forward like a cat and a tiger. Because the good god in the dark did not appear again, Haiyan pulled Haining to the next deck smoothly. The original root monster didn't catch up, Haiyan muttered. Originally, I thought that if the other party caught up, I would push Haining's last few warriors out to buy time. But now it seems that it is not necessary. Because the hatch is right in front of us. Pushing the hatch open, the bright moonlight broke through the thick fog and shone on Haiyan's face. The thick fog is gradually dissipating. Alive, they came out alive. Haiyan and Haining gradually relaxed. Haining seemed a little bit unbelievable. Surprisingly, it was so easy to escape. So, the way to escape from this ship seems to be so simple. Don't be malicious, don't think about the rules, and don't do any assassination. As long as you don't look at anything and do nothing, you can successfully get out of this ship alive after walking all the roads on the 3 decks. Haiyan also looked back with lingering fear. From the fact that the other party did not stop him and Haining from escaping. That so-called he seems to be a good god. However, at this moment, Haiyan heard Haining's cry of pain. Ah! Turning his head, Haining's body was cut off. And the sea warriors who protected Haining were cut into pieces of fish. Because the thick fog had dissipated, Haiyan clearly saw who did all this. A demon with long horns on his head and wings behind him. How could the demon appear in this war game? Before Haiyan could make a move, Satan raised his hands and clapped. Look what I saw. A few lucky ones who came out alive. Picking up a piece of sashimi made of a sea warrior, Satan put it into his mouth and tasted it. Oh! It's full of the breath of surviving a disaster, it's so satisfying. Looking at Haiyan with a cat and mouse look, Satan didn't seem to mind letting the other party die like a villain. You know, the existence that is chasing you has its own reasons. One is for justice, and the other is for protection. Haiyan analyzed the way to escape while listening to what Satan said. It just sounded wrong. The two monsters in the thick fog became good people in Satan's mouth. But I'm different. Satan suddenly smiled grimly. Satan took out a solid incendiary bomb left over from dinner and threw it on Haining. Haiyan quickly hid aside. But Haining, whose body was cut off, couldn't move at all. He could only watch a ball of fire coming out of Satan's nose and detonating the solid incendiary bomb. Boom! In Haining's desperate eyes, the raging fire enveloped the hatch. Satan turned to look at Haiyan and said with a smile, "I am different from them. I don't need a reason to kill you. I like to see your expressions turn from surviving a disaster to despair. This feeling really makes me happy." He is simply a madman. Haiyan finally stopped listening to Satan's nonsense. He turned around and was about to dive into the sea. But the next moment, a bamboo stick for grilling fish went straight through his body. He realized that Satan had just cut several sea warriors into sashimi in an instant. At this speed, he couldn't escape at all. The cruiser gradually became quiet, leaving only the crackling sound of the flames from time to time. Not long after, a scent of grilled fish floated up. Looking at the gradually brightening sky. Deep in the sea, Chao Chi's face was not very good. Lang Hao was hooked away by a fishhook from nowhere, and his life or death was unknown. Haiyan and Haining also failed to return before dawn. At this moment, all the messages Chao Chi sent on the friend interface fell into the sea. I'm afraid Haiyan and Haining have also met with an accident. 3 lords were lost at once. What is the situation of these 2 ships? Seeing that the morning sun has completely risen and knowing that humans are about to wake up, Chao Chi temporarily gave up the plan to go on board to find out. No longer waiting for Haiyan and Haining, Chao Chi turned around and led people to swim in one direction. I will come back again.